Every single civilization around the world has a creation myth, a story that attempts to explain how the universe we currently live in was created, what is its purpose, and how we, humans, populated this world. Some of these creation myths are lost in time because of a lack of written records or simply because of the passage of time. But fortunately for us, the creation myth, according to the Egyptian mythology, is among the best preserved, and that's what we will talk about today. The texts from the pyramids and the Book of the Dead of the ancient Egyptians provide us with a lot of information and insight into how they viewed the creation of the world and their thoughts about the origins of humanity. But just before we get into it, if you want to see more videos like this on mythology and history, make sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss the next ones. As I said earlier, a lot of what we know about the Egyptian cosmology comes mainly from the pyramid texts, but also from the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead. But the vast majority of all the information we have about the creation myths really comes from the pyramid texts, one of the earliest sources of ancient Egyptian religious beliefs inscribed on the walls of the pyramids during the Old Kingdom. There are four main variations of the creation myths that are focused on the four major cities of ancient Egypt, which are Heliopolis, Hermopolis, Memphis, and Thebes. We'll start by taking a look at how the people of Heliopolis viewed the creation of the world. This story, like many other creation myths, begins with the element of life, water. It was a vast, swirling and chaotic expanse of water that extended to infinity. This was a primordial ocean that presided over all things in Egyptian mythology. That ocean would eventually create life and death. Its name was Nun. From the waters of this ocean emerged the very first Egyptian deity, the creator god known as Atum. Atum is now recognized as a primitive form of the sun god Ra. He created himself and emerged from this infinite ocean on a mound of earth called Ben. From that moment and on forward, he became the creator of everything that would ever exist. Soon after his creation, Atum created his first two descendants, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess associated with humid air, rain, and clouds. Together they formed the very first divine couple. Shortly after their creation, Shu and Tefnut got bored and were curious about the infinite ocean surrounding them, and that's why they decided to go on and explore it together. But after a while the couple did not return and Atum started to worry. He thought that something terrible happened to them, and that's why, unable to bear their loss, he sent his right eye to search for the couple and bring them back to him. When they finally returned with the eye of their creator, Atum was so overjoyed that he shed tears of joy, and these tears created the very first human beings. Shu and Tefnut then spent some time together and gave birth to Geb, the god of earth and vegetation, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Geb and Nut were inseparable. They were always together, and their embrace was so tight that it gave birth to countless stars and 4 divine children representing the forces of nature and life. These children were Osiris, the god of order and fertility, Isis, the goddess of maternity and protector of women and children, Seth, the god of chaos and the harsh, scorching desert, and finally Nephthys, the goddess that was responsible for protecting the dead. However, the bond between Geb and Nut was simply too strong, and their father, Shu, had no choice but to separate them. With one hand he lifted Nut high up above the earth, and with his foot he mobilized Geb under him, thus creating the physical boundaries of the world as we know it. These 9 gods formed the Ennead of Heliopolis, and they were supposed to represent all the natural forces present in the universe. With Atum at the forefront, the Ennead represented the most important and powerful gods in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Now let's take a look at how the people of Hermopolis viewed the creation of the world. Basically, their cosmogony was based on a set of 8 gods and goddesses to whom they attributed the entire creation of the world. This was the Ogdoad of Hermopolis. It matches the ancient name of the city, which was Chemnu, and it can be translated by the City of 8. Hermopolis was actually the name given by the Greeks, meaning the city of Hermes. The beginning of creation in Hermopolis starts with the same primordial ocean with swirling and chaotic waters. The big difference is that within these waters there was not one powerful creator god, but 8 gods and goddesses that each represented different aspects of the nature of the universe. There were 4 pairs of primitive gods and goddesses representing the sum of the existence before creation. There were 4 gods with frog heads and 4 goddesses with serpent heads. Serpents and frogs were animals that were often associated with water and fertility, and that's why they were associated with creation. The four pairs of gods were Nun and Naunet, representing water, He and Hehet, representing infinity, Kek and Kauket, representing darkness, and finally Amon and Amonet, representing the hidden element. The whole concept of the hidden or invisible element is rather vague. It's something that transcends ordinary understanding, and it basically represents the mysterious and unseen forces at work in the cosmos. According to the Hermopolitan view of creation, these deities were responsible for the emergence of the primitive mound of earth from the ocean. It was on this little patch of land that a lotus flower bloomed, or according to other versions, an egg hatched from which the sun god emerged and rose high up into the sky to bring light and warmth to the world. This precise moment, when the sunlight illuminated the whole world, was considered as the beginning of time itself and everything that would exist thereafter. Then we have the creation myth centered on the city of Memphis, which was considered by some to be the simplest. For them, everything revolved around the god Ptah. As the god of artisans, blacksmiths, and architects, Ptah was considered by the priests of the city of Memphis as the greatest artisan of all time, and thus, logically, they assumed that he crafted all things in the world. Much of what we know about Ptah and his role as a creator god comes from the Shabaka stone, a stele found in Memphis. The texts allude to the Heliopolitan creation myth centered around Atum, but continue by asserting that the god Ptah existed a long time before him. It explicitly states that it was the god of artisans who created Atum and all the other gods and everything that would exist later. The priests of Memphis believed that it was through the heart and speech of Ptah that everything came into existence. This meant that the god created things in his mind, whether it be gods, animals, objects, or plants, and then simply breathed life into them with creative speech, uttering the name of each thing one by one. This method of creating life through creativity and imagination corresponded to Ptah's identity as the god of artisans. Think about how an artisan thinks before creating something. Usually they envision the final product in their head, thinking about its shape, size, and purpose, and then they plan on how to bring this vision to life, considering the materials they have at their disposition and the tools needed. It's basically the same thing with the god Ptah, but at a much larger scale, because he did not only create objects, but also living and breathing life forms, among other things. Finally, we had the creation myth centered around the city of Thebes. For them, the god Amon was not just one of the members of the Ogdoad, but also a very powerful force whose hidden power controlled everything. He was considered to be above the sky and below the underworld, which basically means that he was omnipresent and all-knowing. Amon was a very important god for Thebes. With his consort Mut and their son Khonsu, they formed the Theban Triad, a revered divine family that held significant religious and political importance in ancient Egypt. Their worship and cult was centered around the Karnak temple complex in Thebes, which was, at the time, one of the largest religious complexes on the entire planet. The priests of Thebes believed that inside the temple was the mound of the beginning, or the Benben, where Amon brought the world into being for the very first time. In one Theban myth, the birth of Amon was linked to the cry of a goose, a powerful sound that broke the silence of the primordial waters and triggered the creation of time. This particular event marked the beginning of all creations and led to the formation of both the Ogdoad and the Ennead. Originally, Amun and Ra were considered to be two separate deities, but because of their similar nature, over time, they eventually merged. That's because Ra, who was an older god, was considered to be the supreme god for many Egyptians, but it quickly changed when the capital of the kingdom was moved to the city of Thebes, which of course worshipped Amon. Once that happened, many began to see Amon and Ra as one and the same, and thus giving birth to Amon-Ra. In the end, although all these creation myths may differ in how they approach certain stories and details regarding the importance of certain gods compared to others, they all share a fairly similar approach to the creation of the world. And that shows that despite their differences, the ancient Egyptians believed in a fundamental understanding of their cosmic origins. So there you have it, a little introduction to the most important creation myths in Egyptian mythology. Thanks everyone for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and wish to see more like this, don't forget to like and subscribe, and maybe take a look at my other videos if you are interested in mythology. Now then, thanks again to all of you, and see you next time.